Hello and welcome to Social Studies Teachers Have Issues. I'm Dr. Heather Ballinger.
And I'm Dr. Kyle Ward.
The main objective for this webcast series is to try and help social studies teachers who are stretched too thin, both financially and with the amount of time they can put into prepping for their classes. This lack of time and money often hurts teachers when it comes to vetting some of the better teaching resources that are already out there.
To do this, we are interviewing education experts from a series of museums, libraries, and institutions. Interesting enough, many of these organizations suffer from the same issue of not having enough time or money to reach out to teachers across the country. They often have to rely on social studies teachers stumbling across their websites or one of their professional development opportunities to learn about what resources they have.
With that in mind, the issue we're going to deal with today is how to teach about the Constitution. In order to learn more about the Constitution and how to teach about it, we'll be interviewing Sarah Harris, the Senior Director of Teacher and Student Programs from the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. Welcome, Sarah. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start with a quick background. Can you explain to us if the position that you have and where you're working, Heather and I are going to guess that at some point in time, history, civics, politics, government, or something like that probably got you excited. Can you give us a background, like where you're from? Did you go to college? Did you train to do this position? How did you end up in that position at the NCC?
Yeah. So my background is in history and secondary education. So I graduated from the College of New Jersey with a degree in history and secondary education. And I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a teacher. There is something about being the one to get to share information that was really kind of appealing to me. I'm sure that there was also something very appealing about standing in front of the room and just talking all day too. That was very exciting for me. But I also just fell in love with history. I love the stories that history has to share. I love all of the people and the perspectives that you get to learn about when you study history too. I love those moments where, one small thing can change and it would change the trajectory of something really, really huge. And I think I learned that when I went to a summer camp as a, middle schooler or high schooler. And I took these courses and I was learning from these instructors who could just kind of stand up in front of the room and tell these amazing stories from history. And even if they didn't have any connection to me, this, kid from New Jersey, they were just so engaging and compelling. And so I fell in love with really that aspect of history. And then by default, kind of by government and civics, because I'm a firm believer that you can't separate the two of them. So I've really kind of, known from a very young age that that is what I wanted to do with my life. And so I taught for 5 years. I taught freshman history in New Jersey, and then made my way over to the museum world.
Before I turn it over to Heather, quick follow-up question. Did you, if you were in college, did you view yourself as being a constitutional expert before you took this job?
Oh dear, no. And actually, when I was in college, I interned at the National Constitution Center. And so, I was maybe a junior in college at the time. So I hadn't even done my student teaching yet, but my cousin worked previously with the former manager of education. And so in, just emails or texts that they had sent or whatever, he had told her that he was looking for an intern and, basically said, "Do you know anybody who really loves history and is just a big nerd when it comes to this stuff?" And she was like, "Boy, do I." And, forwarded him my information. So I learned, so much more about the complexity and the nuance of the Constitution as a college junior before heading into my student teaching and things like that. And so I think that served as kind of a foundation for how I framed my class when I became a full-time teacher. But I mean, by no means was I a constitutional expert then or now or ever really, I'm sure. Just someone who loves to learn about it.
Very cool. Heather, can I turn it over to you?
Yeah, that's fun, your connection as an intern, and then you took the turn into teaching. So at the National Constitution Center, can you explain, sort of the organization, what the main function of it, maybe a little bit about what your day-to-day work looks like?
Yeah. So we are a physical museum in Philadelphia. And we are unique for a multitude of reasons, not the least of which is that in 1988, we were chartered by Congress to disseminate information about the US Constitution on a nonpartisan basis. So this came out of the bicentennial celebrations, right? And this was really kind of a big focus, a bipartisan effort to kind of push forth this organization that would share insight about the Constitution. And so part of the charter too is that we have to be within close proximity to Independence Hall, which we are. We are immediately across the street from Independence Hall, which is beautiful and fantastic. That other part, that kind of nonpartisan part of our mission is something that is much more complex, but something that we take very seriously. And we are uniquely situated that we have to follow this congressional mandate. And so it is a wonderful component of what we do because it is interwoven in everything at the actual museum, but also everything that we share online and kind of nationwide with teachers and students. In addition to that, not only do we kind of have this congressional charter that makes us really unique, but we kind of live in a multitude of worlds, right? We are a civic organization with a national reach. But we also have this physical museum space. And so we kind of get to kind of live in both of these spaces because we do get to go out there and talk to teachers nationwide, but we also get to kind of root everything that we do in this beautiful museum where we have exhibits about not only the founding era, but also the Civil War and Reconstruction and the 19th Amendment and all of these moments of constitutional change that are not only rooted in the document itself, but also rooted in all of these amazing stories and perspectives that led to these constitutional changes. So we get a chance to kind of tell the story of the Constitution through not only a civics and government lens, but through this kind of historical storytelling lens as well, which I really, really love. Heather, you had asked about the day to day here at the NCC. And so we are so lucky that we get to engage with teachers from across the country. So on any given day, we're planning professional learning sessions. I was just telling Kyle that, one of our team members is in West Virginia tomorrow. He's in Michigan the next day. I don't know. I had to get a map in order to showcase everything that everywhere that we're going, because I have to kind of ground my geography skills a little bit. But we're also engaging with students through virtual programs and really just kind of planning for what's next. We do a lot of research and brainstorming. Our team largely is made up of former educators. So many, if not all of us, in some capacity have served in the classroom, especially in our teacher program side. And so we have this kind of unique perspective that we can share in that process as well. While we also recognize the fact that the longer that we're here at the National Constitution Center, the farther removed we are from the classroom. So our perspective and experiences are lovely, but things change. And none of us were in the classroom post COVID. So we just kind of recognize the shifts that have happened in the education field since then. And then we really just kind of build on all of the best practices that we've learned from teachers and things like that too. On any given day, I get to go upstairs and see these amazing, exhibit and artifacts and things like that too, which is just a little added bonus of what I get to do on a daily basis.
Oh, that's so fun. Speaking of that, what kind of big projects or anything coming up with the National Constitution Center that people might be interested in or that we should be aware of?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a big year, right? So, kind of semi quincentennial celebrations aside and commemorations aside, we do have tons of resources related to everything to do with the 250th. We have online resources with the Declaration of Independence, an online kind of interactive version of the Declaration. We have scholarly essays written on different, big principles of the Declaration too. We have classroom ready resources related to that. And really, they were all developed with beyond the 250th in mind. So, how do we kind of create something for this moment, but something that also presents itself as kind of a legacy of resources for afterwards, too? Right now, we are gearing up for the summer, too. So, Kyle and I were just saying that we have 5 summer teacher institutes this summer where we welcome educators from across the country, about 40 each week, to Philadelphia for programs that run from Sunday to Friday. They are among my favorite parts of my job, because it's so lovely to see Philadelphia and our materials through the eyes of the educators who come to visit us. You know, I walk from the train station to work every day, and it's just kind of a boring, rote thing that I do. But to get to see the city through the eyes of everybody who's coming to visit us, especially because they're social studies teachers, is a really nice reminder of how cool this is and how like wonderful this space is. So we're gearing up toward all 5 of those programs this summer. We also, just a couple of years ago, launched what we call our weekend workshops. And these are programs that run from Friday to Sunday, and they are open almost exclusively to rural and remote educators. And so we welcome about 20 teachers to the center for that weekend. And, we do tours and we have scholar talks and classroom application time and things like that, which is, again, wonderful to get to share the space with them. But my favorite part of it is that we also have follow up time with them after they go back to their classroom. So a member of our team schedules, 3 follow up Zoom calls so that we can remain engaged and remain as a resource to answer questions and share insights and to provide a platform for them to collaborate with their peers as well. So yeah, those are just a few of the big projects that we
Just
have
a few
coming
things you've
up.
been working on.
Yeah.
It's so fun to hear about the 250 and how people and organizations are sort of trying to highlight, the importance of democracy and democratic institutions and kind of like the founding ideas of America. And so I'm really happy to hear that the enthusiasm is obviously um, coming through in the way you're describing things. It's really fun.
Yeah.
And you had said something too, and Heather and I deal with this all the time, being social studies methods professors. You were talking about, you haven't been in the classroom for a while, and the more distance you get, and like post COVID, I think things have changed. We could probably spend a lot of time having a conversation about that. Having said that, Sarah, how big is the education team out there?
Oh, that's a good question. So we have grown a lot in the past couple of years. So we have a teacher program side and a student program side of our education team. And so I think in total there's probably about like 13, 14 of us, which is really great. I've been here for almost 8 years, and when I started, there were 3 of us. And so it's lovely to see, it's lovely to have more people on the team, but it's also just lovely to see kind of what we're capable of. And one of the things that I think is really lovely about our team, and I'm sure it's the same about any team, is that we all kind of come with these different perspectives and strengths. And so, especially when you are, a forward facing team where you're engaging with so many different people, it's lovely to see how everybody has their own kind of way of engaging, similarly to how everybody has their own way of teaching and their own, personality in front of a classroom. So yeah, about 13 or 14 of us now.
The other quick follow-up I wanted to ask is about your weekend workshops. You're saying that's
Yeah.
kind of geared more towards rural teachers. Heather and I kind of come from more rural areas of the country too. Are you talking rural like in Pennsylvania, New Jersey area, or is this nationwide?
It's nationwide. And it's a fantastic question because when we started this program, really worked to figure out how we define rural. And Kyle, to your point, it is different across the country, right?
Yeah.
What that means. And so we looked at, distance to a major city. We looked at just kind of zip code lookups. We had toyed around once with the idea of if your school has off for the opening of hunting season, you're a rural school, which is, I know, a very prominent thing out in our area. But yeah, just kind of defining and redefining what that looks like through different states and different parts of the country has been a really interesting and eye-opening component of that project specifically.
Okay, very cool. So Sarah, I am a former middle school, high school social studies teacher. I taught government and civics for a number of years. I always tell my pre-service teachers I did everything possibly wrong so I could tell them how to do it right. Um, But I did teach government, and when the Constitution came up, I noticed when I went to the post office or the grocery store or school board meetings, somebody always stopped me and either had a question or told me, something about the Constitution. Working where you work, what are there any misconceptions out there that you hear all the time, or the things you wish teachers knew? Are there things that you hear as people go through the museum? It's like, oh, we just have that wrong here. What jumps out at you as one thing that we wish you could clarify for people?
Yeah. One of the things that comes to mind is the connection and the kind of integration of history and civics and government studies, right? So, there have been instances when I was in the classroom where I was a US history teacher, and I would incorporate the Constitution. It was like, well, why do we have to dive into the Constitution? And it's like, well, because it's integrated into every component of history. Or when I'm at a conference, and people see National Constitution Center and they come up to the table and they say, like, I teach US history, but I'm going to grab this stuff for my civics or government teachers. I'm thinking, like, how can you not do both of those things? And so I think one of the things that I love so much about the National Constitution Center is, we incorporate both of those components, right? That kind of like historical storytelling lens with understanding the nuances and complexities of the Constitution. And that's so important, because the Constitution is complex. And in some regards, it should be, right? It's lasted this long, and it couldn't do that if it didn't have some of that nuance built into it. So I think kind of being comfortable with understanding and reflecting on that nuance, and understanding that you can't study the Constitution in a vacuum, are two things that are like, those are the things that really, you know, I hope that people recognize, and I hope that people kind of want to learn more about, and aren't afraid to kind of learn about the complexity, and be comfortable in some of the complexity too.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, that's a
Heather?
good point. I remember in my teaching experience, I got a little like when we got to the Constitution, it can be a little bit overwhelming, and you don't want to teach it wrong. So this idea that um, it's a flexible document, but the way it's interpreted is different for different political viewpoints, and there is a lot of nuance there. So I agree with you on that one. That makes sense.
And also that it provides so much information, right?
Mhm.
So, I remember one of the more recent elections, my husband and I were watching the election returns, and he's looking at the electoral map, and he's noting that Maine and Nebraska are, you know, filled in differently on the electoral map. And he's like, Sarah, why do you think that is? And I was like, buckle up. Here we go. We're going to talk about the electoral college, and we're going to talk about, how their system is different than the other states, and that this why the states can pick it. And so it's one of those things where, we kind of, when we question things, we're just like, where did this come from? And more often than not, it's like it came from the Constitution, and there's a reason why it is that way. And we can talk about the merits of, changing things or how it's changed over time. But I think that people kind of see it as this just an old document, and not one that can provide so much insight into the things that we're dealing with today. Um, Again, much to the chagrin of my family, who have to deal with these long-winded explanations when they ask simple questions about an electoral map, but the sentiment remains the same.
We're gonna have to steal that one. Buckle up. We're gonna talk about some social studies issues. All
Heather,
right.
I will pass it over to you.
Okay, so speaking of, classroom teaching resources that you provide, we'd love to see if you and I think we make you host is now the next question I have. I'm going to make you a co-host right now. I'd love to see, or we'd love to see, with the mindset of the classroom teacher, or even students in our classes that are studying history, what resources does your institution offer that we could bring the Constitution to life, so to speak?
All right. So, would you like me to share my screen and
I
actually
would
show?
love
Please.
that if you could walk us through
That's,
it.
I sure can, especially because our website is notorious, and it's getting better, but our website is situated as such that if you know exactly what you're looking for and exactly where to find it, you're good. If you don't, you might have some difficulty navigating it. So I'm happy to help in whatever capacity I can. So one of the, again, kind of unique things about the National Constitution Center is that since we have a physical museum space, we are able to share some of those components of our exhibits online with educators too. So we have a new exhibit that's opening in just a couple of weeks. But for the exhibits that already live or that are already here at the NCC, we have some online interactives that you're able to access, even if you're not able to come to Philadelphia. So I just did museum and exhibits, and I should have practiced this to make sure that I knew where I was going. But these are all of our exhibit spaces listed here. If you click on some of them, we'll start with Civil War and Reconstruction. There are some of these exhibit interactives that are listed here as well. And so all of our exhibit spaces as they stand have several of these interactives to share. So office holders by the numbers shares exactly that. It highlights the Black men who held office during the Reconstruction time period, which is
Mhm.
an oftentimes kind of neglected part of the Reconstruction story. So really kind of sharing, the offices that they held, who they are, where they were from, all of that kind of information as well, which again just shows a more kind of complex and nuanced tale of Reconstruction. I think I clicked on Alabama twice. So it shows kind of all of the men who served in the government during Reconstruction. If we go back, we also have in their own words. And so this one is a collection of stories of formerly enslaved folks who shared kind of not only their story, but also what freedom and equality and liberty meant for them. And so these were recorded during the Great Depression with the Works Progress Administration. And it's, again, just this kind of wonderful primary source representation that's done in a way that's different than just kind of the written word. One of the things, again, as my kind of like former teacher hat, when I taught my freshman students, they had already learned about the Civil War. And I think that they would have been surprised to know that in the time period that we studied in the Great Depression, that there were people still alive from the Civil War, right? Like in their minds, because they were in two different grades, like clearly history stopped and restarted right after Reconstruction so that they could
Totally.
learn about it as ninth graders. So it just kind of like bridges very, I think, distinct time frames in American history in a way that is really powerful, I think, too. Um, I won't go over all of them, but I will just highlight that there are some online interactives as well for the First Amendment, for the 19th Amendment, for our new America's Founding Gallery. So all of those are accessible, even again, if you're unable to come to Philadelphia. If we go to education, one of the things that I really wanted to highlight as well is our virtual student programs. And so we have three different opportunities. All of them are free. And I say that because I always forget to say it. And so I want to make sure that I really like drive that point home. So they kind of differ in terms of like length and exactly what they offer, but scholar exchanges are 45-minute live sessions where teachers tell us a date, time, and topic, and we zoom in a judge or a lawyer to talk to their students about it. So we do all of the lifting in terms of like scheduling and things like that, but it's just a really great kind of unique way to talk about these constitutional topics from practitioners, from people who are, we've done sessions in the past where we're talking about the Fourth Amendment and the judge who is serving as the scholar just signed a search warrant earlier that day. So they can just kind of provide some of that really unique insight, which I think is really, really cool. We also have civic stories, which are 30-minute stories about an artifact. And so we get to lean on our museum background a little bit in that one. And we share an artifact, talk to students about it. They kind of have to guess about what it is and kind of make some assumptions and ask some questions. And then we share different stories about the artifact and connect it to the Constitution. And then decoding the document is our newest one, and that is just kind of diving into a primary source and moving through it in different iterations so that students have the tools that they need to really kind of dive deeply into what that source is and what it means and how it connects to their studies. So Oh, that was a lot. But I think these programs that we've talked a lot about teachers and we've talked about the resources for teachers specifically, but these are some of our kind of virtual, again, student programs that teachers can access from across the country as well.
Sarah, real quick follow up to that.
Please.
How much scheduling time do you need? Do I a few weeks, a few months if I want to do this? How long before it happens do I have to contact you?
That's a great question. We normally ask for about 2 weeks, just so that we can kind of reach out to the scholars and schedule that. Another question that we often get is, as is the case with most teachers, I have multiple classes. I have, three on level classes and an honors class, or I have two AP classes, or for our middle school teachers, I have five classes of students throughout the
Right.
day. We'll do multiple sessions throughout the course of the day as well. So, scholar exchanges specifically started in earnest. They started pre COVID and then really kind of took off during COVID. And there were days where I would just be logged on with the same teacher from 8:30 until 2:30, and I we would do 5 or 6 sessions with them.
That's really great. I'm also wondering if you have, home run activities or things that are very popular with teachers that come up again and again as being like, I love this lesson or I love this resource. We use it frequently.
These student programs are among examples, Heather, of that. Like, we will hear a lot
I can
from
see why. This is
teachers,
really
and
cool.
it is really, really cool. But another one that I will share, so one of the things that is worthwhile to share too is we have the ability to kind of search different topics too. So classroom resources by topic, teachers can look through and see exactly what it is that they're teaching and, find something that aligns to their work as well. And I say that because everybody, curricula change so much throughout the country. And so it's helpful to kind of have that insight as well. But one of the newest things that we offer, Heather, to get to your question specifically, is this Constitution in the Headlines. And this is a curated resource where we kind of look to some major questions and discussions that are happening in the country at in the moment, and we create resources to help support teachers and students for that. So kind of including the asset itself, the constitutional question, and then different perspectives from different legal scholars, and then student questions and choices as well. So this can be taken in whole or in part. Obviously, we wouldn't expect a student to do all of these things, but what's really kind of empowering about our nonpartisan structure is that we can provide students, or we can provide, yeah, students and teachers with the resources to talk about some of these current events and to talk about it in a way that remains civil and respectful because it's so rooted in nonpartisanship. Um, so we started this last year, and we've really just kind of expanded what we're able to cover and how we're able to cover it in a really unique way.
Yeah, and thank you. That's a great example. I love the idea of connecting current events with historical topics, particularly related to the Constitution, because this idea of it being an alive and dynamic document in which we're approaching it with modern problems and the way that it's interpreted is so important. I'm wondering if when you and the people developing these lessons, if you have conversations about grade level appropriateness or not. I mean, maybe appropriate's not the like, but like
Mhm.
how to differentiate between grade levels or even topics like, could this be taught in a psychology class or a sociology class or, so I'm wondering if you have conversations like that with the other people that you work with in your program.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, if only for a moment, just because the big white screen in the background's probably not great. But yeah, Heather, we talk about that all the time, right? And so we have those conversations because we are uniquely situated. I know I keep saying that, but one of the things that we are always dealing with is the fact that in engaging with the Constitution, even just the Lexile level is inherently higher than anything else, right? The word constitution itself is going to increase the Lexile score and just inherently make it a more difficult text to engage with. And so
Exactly.
we are constantly talking about how Our material is rigorous because the Constitution is complex and rigorous, and that's okay. But we have to make sure that then the resources that we're offering make it an accessible document and make it an accessible topic. And so, obviously, the easiest lift is AP level classes where these students are so incredibly engaged, or college level classes where the students are so incredibly engaged and kind of ready to dive into it. But then how do we make these materials accessible for, our ninth graders or our middle schoolers or our upper elementary schoolers? And so we've we last year we launched our Constitution 101 course for middle school specifically, and there was a lot of research that went into that. Kyle, I have never been a middle school teacher. Know you said that you have. I have a middle school son, and I give so much credit to middle school teachers because I spend, my life with him, and I cannot imagine teaching him too. So, there was a lot of research that went into how to engage with middle schoolers, how to ensure that our topics were accessible and appropriate, Heather, for that level of learners. And so we take that really, really seriously. And I think we talk about it at least, several times a week because we do want to make sure that we're not excluding any learners just by the natural kind of the inherent, I guess, like readability of the resources
Mhm.
that we have too.
Yeah, that's a great point. But I mean, even that example that you gave us, I mean, I think that is like one of the key components of connecting content to students is like, why is this important? Like, why is this
Mhm.
relevant? So if we're already talking about current events, things they might be hearing in the news or hearing their teachers talking about or hearing their community members talking about, like, so many questions about, especially around election times, about the
Mhm.
electoral college and why that exists. Like you always, like you were saying, like, well, buckle up because it's
Yeah.
complicated,
Yeah.
but I do think when we present complicated issues to middle school students or high school students, like they're ready for it and they want to engage in it. But I think you're right that the readability or the complexity of even just the words, constant,
Right.
can get people be like, "Oh, it's not for me," or boring snooze fest, or a
Mhm.
variety of things that can happen. But I think um, you've shown us some examples of things that are really highlighting how to hook interest, and I think
Mhm.
that's a key to kind of good history teaching. So I'm happy
Yeah.
to see that. Thank you for sharing those with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sarah, I work at a university and in that at the university, my students they do emphasis areas in political science and history and economics and things like that. Some of my students take content classes where they're taking history and political science classes, US government and things like that. And there are teachers out there too that sometimes want to just write their own lesson plans. Are there resources that you have at the NCC that teachers or students could go into to do more research on some of the topics related to the Constitution?
Yeah. So everything that we do is really kind of rooted in scholarly work as well. So I had mentioned very briefly the interactive declaration that we have, and that was annotated by Akil Reed Amar. And so, just kind of diving into that resource in and of itself is a fantastic way to kind of deepen understanding and connection to the declaration. We have essays that are written about different kind of principles relating to America at 250 that were all created by leading constitutional scholars and legal scholars. Um, we have a collection of or excuse me, called the Founders Library, but we have a collection of primary source documents as well. And so what we did is we divided American history into 6 different time periods, and we partnered up scholars based on their areas of expertise. And what we said to them was, you have to go pick the 10 documents that are quintessential to teaching your time period. So if you're leading this content class, you're teaching college level students, what are those documents that you would use in order to do it? And so they came back to us with far more than 10 documents, which is, totally fine, but, a lot more to go through. But what I really love about it is both of those scholars then had to agree on it. So it's not just scholar A and scholar B coming and we're just kind of listing all of them. We're saying you need to sit down and you need to talk about this and you need to figure out where you overlap and where you agree. And those are the documents that we're going to feature on this founders library. And so again, this kind of nonpartisanship that's really interwoven into everything we do is that these scholars, we wanted to provide that support for teachers to say, I'm going to use this primary source document. If you get any questions from administrators or parents, you can say it's the National Constitution Center, it's these scholars, it's, these are primary sources that were agreed upon as necessary to teaching this time period. And so those types of materials are all there. They're not exclusively for educators. Students can access them, community members can access them. It's really important to us that we have that available to everybody. So, kind of deepening research in that capacity, or just trying to learn about a specific person or event or time period, that's all accessible on our website as well.
It's impressive how much time you spend on being unbiased, finding common ground, and things like that, which I'm sure is a tricky thing to do there as well. So,
Yeah, it really does kind of shape a lot of what we do, and one of the things that is kind of the litmus test for us is we deal exclusively in what we call constitutional questions and not political questions. So the way that we frame it is what can the government do, not what should the government do.
Mm.
And it's a really small difference, but it is profound with like the lasting impact and ripple effects that it has, not just in kind of how we frame our work, but also how we ask questions, how we engage in discussion. My class was filled with discussions. And so just having those right questions, the right question structure is really kind of essential to ensuring that the discussion doesn't turn into a debate, doesn't turn into a screaming match, doesn't turn into, something else more serious. And so that kind of can versus should mentality is again something that we kind of check and double check everything and everything that we do for sure.
that's really interesting. It is a minor change, but it does
Mhm.
have a huge, huge impact. That's really fascinating. Heather, can I
Yeah.
send it over to
Yeah, I
you?
think yeah, it sounds helpful for teachers to think about the way that they frame questions and questioning, and how they teach, topics and sort of thematic issues. I like that idea of and how to frame it. Thank you. Okay. So moving away a little bit from the National Constitution Center and maybe just a little bit more about you. Are there any books or documentaries or films that you would suggest teachers read to better understand the Constitution and how to teach it?
This was the hardest question, I think. And I was, like looking at my bookshelf and thinking about things and so difficult. But with the newest release of the Ken Burns documentary, right, The American Revolution, we have all been, watching it and engaging with it and, just trying to soak up as much of it as we possibly can. Not just professionally, but I know all of us have we talked about watching it at home with our families. And, I mentioned I have an eighth grader, and this is part of his curriculum this year. And so we watched it as a family, and we watched not all, every single part of it quite yet, but we watched, the first episode. And it was so lovely because we watched it, and I didn't think anything was going to stick. He's 13 years old. But the next day in class, they were talking about the Boston Tea Party and he had to answer questions about the Boston Tea Party and he like quoted the scholars from the, watching the
Nice.
documentary the night before. And it was just a proud history mom moment for sure. But we again, it's kind of everything that we stand for in this idea of telling these stories and offering multiple perspectives and really kind of providing that context for what would come later with the constitution. So that was really really lovely. We also have this, I had mentioned these essays before as well, and they have been kind of this grounding opportunity to engage with these lasting principles of America at 250. And we actually are kind of binding them into a book called The Promise of America. And so this has been a really wonderful experience for us institutionally because we get to think about discussion questions and book clubs and all of these things. But again, it's also this kind of like legacy of the 250th and how it's going to connect, because the summer is going to be huge, but for us and for many civic organizations, it's just the beginning of, a slew of anniversaries coming up. And it will continue until the semiquincentennial of the Constitution, in 2037, if I did my math right. So, there's this whole kind of civic decade, as we're calling it, that is going to kind of lead into all of these other anniversaries. So I have a sneaky feeling that there's going to be so many more things to read and watch and do and everything over the next 11 years.
Sarah's calling it, it's gonna be a civic decade.
Yep. Yeah.
I think we could
Yeah.
use that. That sounds great. I'm here for it. Sign me up. Speaking of getting registered and signing up, how can teachers get involved with the National Constitution Center, register for some of these institutions, or do you have newsletters, anything like that?
Mhm.
That if I'm excited and I want to get involved.
Yeah, we sure do. So we have an educator newsletter and it goes out every single week. And we include all of this information. So the weekend workshops, when those applications are open, we'll post that kind of information. When our summer institute applications are open, we'll post that. We have monthly professional learning sessions during the school year too that we'll share information about. So we really, that's really important to us that we are as transparent as possible and can share that insight with everybody if they're interested in joining us.
Right. Go ahead,
So,
Kevin.
yeah, Sarah, we're going to get you out on this question. And listening to the answer you gave a second ago, Heather and I discovered that this is sometimes torturous for people in your position
Oh
here.
no.
But do you have a favorite artifact,
Mhm.
document, story, something that resonates with you and connected to your work?
Yes, I sure do. And I got this. This one was actually one of the easiest things for me to answer.
Okay.
So hopefully that means it's a good answer and not just, one of the exhibit spaces that we have is a Civil War and Reconstruction exhibit. And it opened pretty early in my tenure here at the NCC. And so one of the things that we had found in like doing research and figuring out exactly how we wanted the public to kind of engage with this space was there were four women. Like Harriet was a really popular name during that time period, and there were four women particularly who all were really crucial to the Civil War and Reconstruction, whose name was Harriet. So Harriet Beecher Stowe, Harriet Tubman, Harriet Jacobs, and Harriet Scott. And so when we had kind of done all of this, we had noticed this connection and we had thought like this, there's something here. Let's do some research. And I was tasked with doing some of this research. And I loved learning about all of these women and I loved kind of doing research and diving into their lives. But the one that really stood out to me and that I kind of resonated with or really kind of was drawn to was Harriet Scott, who was Dred Scott's wife. And so I think, I have a history degree. I know my stuff, right? I read, I do research, I love history. And I had never heard of Harriet Scott before. I had never known that her story was so profound and so rich and not necessarily compared to Dred's story because his story is also essential, but just how it kind of shaped the understanding of the Dred Scott decision
Mm.
and how telling her story could get us to the same exact court case as telling his story. And so it was just this kind of wonderful realization that changing that perspective or just kind of gaining additional insight, leading with curiosity in that capacity, and just gaining that insight into her story was so engaging and so profound. And, she had two daughters, she and Dred had two daughters. And, the outcome of the case was going to impact the status of her daughters because slavery passed down through the mother. So if Harriet was free, her two daughters were free. And so there's just so many kind of layers and again, nuance in her story specifically. And I couldn't get enough of learning about it and learning about how, you know, Dred passed away a year after they were given their freedom. But Harriet and her two daughters, Eliza and Lizzie, all three of them lived to not only gain their freedom, but also to see the ratification of the 14th Amendment. And there's something, again, kind of profoundly beautiful about seeing, this infamous Supreme Court case being overturned and codified in the Constitution in such a big way. And so
Right.
I don't know if it was kind of a combination of it was one of my first like museum kind of focused projects, or if it was, at the time I started here, my daughter was 6 months old maybe. And so, just the mother of two children, and I'm a mother of two children. And I was just so kind of drawn to her story. And I share it in whenever I get the opportunity to kind of talk about her, and again, just kind of how she impacted the trajectory of our country really, and this connection to the Constitution in such a real way.
And I think that's why history is so interesting and has the potential to really influence and affect people because you make those connections
Mhm.
with the voices of people from the past and you see similarities and differences in circumstance and it all feels like a roll of the dice or chance, but how people um, interact and encounter those challenges. And I love history because the story has already been told. So it's kind of
Mhm.
unfolding for you as you do your research or as you develop a resource. So that's a great example. Thanks for sharing that, Sarah.
Of course, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for visiting with us and sharing about your organizations. If teachers are interested in learning more from you, or what's the best way to get in contact with you personally, or it sounds like your website has is a great place to start. Is can we email you individually, or what do you prefer?
Yeah, please do. So my email address is just sharris, Harris, at constitutioncenter.org. And it's really essential that I love to share this at the end of every professional learning opportunity is it is my job to support teachers and students. It's actually like right in my title. And so there is no email too small to send my way. I am happy to show people how to navigate the website. I'm happy to, answer any questions. And so I am always available to kind of answer any questions or share any insights that I possibly can.
Thanks for tuning in to Social Studies Teachers Have Issues, and we hope to see you next time. We hope today's episode sparked new ideas and gave you practical tools to bring history and civics to life in your classroom. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe, share with your fellow educators, and connect with us online for more resources and upcoming episodes. Together, we're building a stronger community of teachers and shaping the future of education, one resource at a time. Until next time, keep teaching boldly and stay curious.